Hey y'all, it's Amanda, and today we're inside out of the cold and we're talking about Seedling Care 101. Okay, so this is an area of YouTube that I think is seriously lacking in information and content, and that is how to care for your seedlings in that in-between time, that time from when it germinates to when it goes outside, that in-between time when there's a lot that could go right and a lot that could go wrong. So germination definitely feels like success, but it is. But this is actually where most seedlings struggle after the germination point. So today I'm walking you through Seedling Care 101, the basics that keep seedlings healthy after they sprout. Just because you have germination does not mean you're done with that seedling. So I'm going to break it down into different categories we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the first shift, removing from heat and humidity. Then we're going to talk about light, the foundation of healthy seedlings. Then we're going to talk about watering, less is more. Airflow, the unsung hero. Fertilizing, when and how. Diseases and common problems. And thinning, which is hard but necessary. And then what healthy seedlings actually look like. Common seedling care mistakes, and wrapping it up with how seedling care fits into the bigger season. And I know that's a lot of different categories. They're not all super long. So, but this should get you through all of your questions that you have about seedlings, any issues you might be having with them through that middle process. Okay, let's start with the first shift. Remove heat and humidity. So let's pretend that these seeds, these are my geranium seeds, that they just sprouted, like we're good to go. The first thing I want to do is when they're sprouted is I want to remove the humidity dome. At that time, we don't want a humidity dome in there because when you close off all that airflow, it can lead to disease and mold and algae buildup and all kinds of craziness. So remove the humidity dome so we can have great airflow through these seedlings. Next, if you had these on a heat mat, this is my heat mat over here, you would turn off the heat mat or remove them from the heat mat. You no longer need the heat mat after they have sprouted. Now, not all seeds need a heat mat to sprout, but those that do, you want to make sure you remove them from the heat mat. Excess warmth and excess moisture lead to disease. So that's why we've removed both the humidity dome and the heat mat. Heat and humidity help seeds sprout, but they hurt seedlings if left too long. Okay, so moving on to the next category, light, the foundation of healthy seedlings. Seedlings need bright light immediately. As soon as you've removed the humidity dome and from the heat, they must go under bright light immediately. If they have weak light, they become leggy, fragile plants that are not going to do well outside. So I've got my grow lights over here and I've got my seedlings and I want to slide my seedlings into place. I've got my grow light low enough that it's only about 2 to 3 inches above the seedlings right here. So you see, you've got a very small space. You don't want a really large gap between the seedlings and the light because they will reach for it and they will become very leggy and fragile. These lights need to be on minimum 12 to 16 hours per day. I leave mine on for 14 hours a day. They are programmed with just one of those little like programmable switches to stay on for that time. Now, if your light is uneven, you want to rotate your containers every couple of days. Mine's nice and even, so I'm not worried about it. Now down here, you'll see the plants are further away from the light. These are all cuttings, which are not seedlings. And so this is a different situation. This is what you really need to focus on, where they're just 2 to 3 inches below the light. Most seedling problems start with light. That ends up being the biggest issue. It's not water, it's not airflow, but light tends to be the #1 issue with seedlings. A couple of red flags to look for your seedlings if they're having issues with light. If you see them stretching out really far, leaning, or pale growth, like a really pale yellow translucent growth, that is definitely an issue with light. Okay, moving on to watering, less is more. We want to keep soil evenly moist, but we don't want to keep it sopping wet. When you have sopping wet soil, the roots that are down in the soil, they can literally drown and suffocate in that extra moist or water standing in the soil. Bottom watering is ideal once roots develop. So let me show you what that looks like. I've got my calendula right here, And to bottom water, and I actually just did it, I should have waited to show you guys. I would put a water, I usually put about 25% of this container, so like a quarter, fill this container by a quarter with water in the bottom, and then I put my seedlings right back in. And that makes it suck it up from the bottom, but it also makes the roots reach down further to the bottom, which is creating a stronger root system. We don't want to water from the top. We don't want to have to get these wet if we don't need to, because that can create issues with disease. Sometimes there's some misting involved, but I try not to mist. I just try to balance the humidity in my space. Now, I get a lot of questions on how do I know it's time to water my seedlings? Well, you need to be checking your seedlings on a daily basis. I typically lift the container to see if it feels light or heavy. And after you've grown enough seedlings, you'll know exactly if it's light or heavy. If it's heavy, it's fine. If it's light, it most likely is going to need water. At that point, I touch the surface of the soil. And if the surface of the soil feels dry, then it is time to add water. Letting the surface dry slightly between waterings allows for your roots to have a little bit of a breather prior to getting more water. So seedlings drown more often than they dry out. So I think a lot of people overwater seedlings. So making sure that it just dries to the touch on the surface prior to watering is a really good option. Now, once you have bottom watered, allow it to soak up for a few minutes, go back and check it and dump out any of the excess water. I've learned enough about my seedling containers. I know how much water to put in there and know that it's all going to get sucked up. I literally just watered that container right before I started this video. All the water's been sucked up and I didn't have to dump any out. You want to avoid misting constantly. A lot of people will use spray bottles to mist their seedlings to keep them moist if you have humidity issues. I try not to do that because it can lead to disease issues. If you're worried about humidity in your space and you feel like it's too dry and you need more humidity, you could just put out some little bowls of water around your seedling area, and that water will evaporate into the air and add humidity for you. It's also really good to water earlier in the day. We don't want to water when seedlings are going to bed because then they're just sitting in the darkness with excess water. We don't want to do that. So water earlier in the day so you can step back and see if there's any water that needs to be dumped out after watering. Okay, going on to the next one. Airflow is the unsung hero. And the airflow is the area that I typically struggle with the most for my seedlings. So gentle airflow strengthens stems. So I'm going to kind of turn you guys this way so you can see my fan moving around. All right, as you can see, I'm not fancy over here. I've got a $20 fan, oscillating fan from Walmart. I like these long ones because I feel like they spread out the air better. I've got it a couple of feet away from my seedlings. I have it on low, I have it on oscillating, and it just gently adds a little bit of airflow through my seedlings. With this, the airflow, it keeps away excess moisture that leads to disease, algae, and mold buildups. It also helps create stronger stems. The airflow is literally a workout for the seedlings. So the gentle air and standing throughout the gentle air builds muscles and makes for stronger plants. And a small fan on low is enough. You're just trying to disturb the air. I have this one for now. Eventually, when this whole space is filled up with seedlings, because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 massive locations for seedlings, I will put some additional fans at different points so that they can all create cross air through the space. Airflow is important because it's literally how seedlings learn to stand on their own. Just think of them as little babies. They need a little bit of resistance to build those muscles and learn how to stand on their own prior to moving them outside. Okay, next is fertilizing, when and how. And this is also an area that I get a lot of questions about, how and when to fertilize your seeds. I do want to say fertilizing your seeds is a must if you're going to be keeping them inside for quite a while. And if you're starting seeds in January, your seeds are staying inside for a while, and fertilizing is something you are going to have to do. So when you plant these seeds, when you sow these seeds, the seeds have enough food at the very beginning. They have enough food to feed that initial sprout or seedling that comes out of the seed. But once that initial sprout is done, your seedling will begin to develop additional leaves. The first 2 leaves you see come out are the seed leaves. Those are the very first ones. The leaves after the seed leaves are true leaves at that point. True leaves to the plant. Once your plant starts to develop true leaves, it is time to fertilize. I use a diluted fertilizer. I used to use Alaskan fish emulsion. It smells terrible, but it does a great job. But I finally finished my big jug, so I'm done. Several people suggest that I switch to Super Thrive, which has been really great and does not smell nearly as bad considering I'm growing inside. Now, you are not using full strength fertilizer for seedlings. It's way too much for that. So you want to use a diluted liquid fertilizer. You want to use a quarter to a half strength of whatever fertilizer you choose to use. Liquid is best. You want to fertilize lightly and consistently. I like to fertilize every 2 weeks that the seedlings are inside for me. And I literally just add it to my water when I'm watering them. I have my fertilizer in, get it mixed up really, really well, and then water all of my seedlings with it. I do not fertilize every time I water. I do not fertilize every time I water. You can over fertilize and really hurt your seedlings. They don't like a ton of fertilizer in the beginning until they become larger plants. So make sure you're doing it a quarter to a half diluted water, liquid fertilizer. Seedlings don't need a feast. They just need a snack. So remember that. Your fertilizer is just a little snack for those seedlings until they get outside. We don't need to stuff them or overfeed them. So how do you know if you are over fertilizing your seedlings? A few signs to look for: burnt leaf edges. They might brown or yellow around the edges of the leaves. Stalled growth. They might have been growing beautifully and all of a sudden they've stopped and they're doing nothing. And then salt buildup on the soil. You can see a crusty, salty layer at the top of your soil, and that is a sign of over fertilizing. Okay, moving on to diseases and common problems that you might run into. The number one issue that people run into in regards to disease for seedlings is damping off. This kind of looks like a sudden collapse at the soil line. Basically, your seedling will look nice and beautiful one day, and the next day it will look brown right at the soil line and it will have fallen over like that. That is called damping off. That is caused by excess moisture or poor airflow. So making sure that we're not allowing our seedlings to sit in puddles of water and that we've got a fan going are incredibly important. Prevention is key in regards to damping off, because once damping off has occurred, it is fatal to the seedling. You cannot fix it once you have damping off on your seedling. It is a goner. Let's talk about mold and algae. This is another big question I get asked about a lot, because a lot of times as soon as you see some mold or algae build up, a lot of people freak out. So let's talk about that. White fuzzy mold or green algae equals too wet of soil. You need to allow your soil to dry out a little bit more between watering. So if you're seeing white fuzzy mold on top or green, and it's usually like a beautiful forest green and bold green algae, if you're seeing that, your soil is too wet. Now, if you see mold and algae on your seedling tray, it is not always fatal. You can still fix it. It's really just warning signs that you need to pay attention and fix a few things to prevent the mold. So if you see mold or algae on usually the soil of your seedlings, you want to increase airflow. You want to reduce your watering and really allowing the top layer of that soil to dry out prior to adding more water. And then you can also scrape the algae or mold gently away from the soil and discard it. That I find is very satisfying for me and almost gives me like a fresh start. And remember, mold and algae, they are symptoms, not the problem itself. So if you see the mold and the algae, you have other issues that you need to fix in order to get rid of the mold and the algae that are the symptoms. Okay, next we're going to talk about thinning. Hard but necessary. And a lot of people talk about they just feel so terrible about cutting back or removing excess seedlings. So let's talk about why it's necessary. Overcrowding causes weak plants because they are fighting for nutrients, they are fighting for space, and it's just going to create weak plants. So it's best to get rid of all and focus on creating one healthy plant. It's time to thin once the true leaves have appeared. Now remember, we talked about a seed, when it sprouts, the first 2 leaves you see are the seed leaves. The leaves after that first set are true leaves. Once your true leaves begin to appear, it is time to start thinning your seedlings. Now, it's very important to snip out the excess seedlings. Do not pull. When you pull, it disturbs all these very fragile new roots that have been created. Just go in with a tiny, tiny set of scissors. I like to use like embroidery sewing scissors, and go in there and just clip it off right at the base. Hold on to that seedling, clip it off at the stem, right at the soil line, and remove it. Do not pull the seedlings out. Thinning feels very wrong, right? Because this seed has sprouted, it has new life, so it feels very wrong to just go in there and just cut it and end it. But crowded seedlings suffer. So basically, if you're leaving them all in there, it's going to create more chaos when instead you're really wanting to have a healthier plant. All right, let's talk about temperature after germination, because I think that this surprises a lot of people, especially at this time of the year. So you've got these beautiful seedlings, they've sprouted, they're growing on, and temperature after the germination is really important. Slightly cooler temps build sturdier plants. Keep that in mind. You don't want your space to be super, super warm. You want it to be a kind of a cooler 55 to about 65, maybe even up to 70 at the most, but nice cooler temps. Now, why? Why does that create sturdier temps? Why do cooler temps create sturdier plants? Because warmth encourages stretching of all the growth above the soil line. Cooler temps keep that greenery, keep everything above the soil line a little bit more compacted and simple, and it allows roots to develop underneath. So cooler temps allow the plant to focus on roots, and a stronger root system is going to lead to a stronger plant. Now, your temperatures can vary, son, especially at nighttime. If your temps drop a little bit, that's okay, as long as it's warming up a little bit during the day. Cooler temperatures tell seedlings to grow roots, not just stems. So that's why it's very important that you have some of these cooler temps and that you're not growing in a space that's overly warm. All right, moving on, let's talk about what healthy seedlings actually look like. How can you identify that your seedling is healthy? So healthy seedlings are going to have compact growth. They're not going to be reaching and stretching out all over the place, flopping over and such. They're going to have nice compact growth. They're going to have a nice deep green color, unless the leaf is supposed to be something else like coleus. We grow coleus. Even the true leaves will start showing the color of the coleus, but most seedlings are going to have a nice deep green color. The growth is going to be slow but steady. You're not going to see ridiculously fast growth on most seedlings, especially at this time of the year. Now, where will you see fast growth? Typically annuals, summer annuals. If you start them inside, they're going to grow very quickly outside. You're going to have them inside for a short amount of time, and then you're going to be putting them out there. We're really kind of focusing on the seedlings that you're growing here now during the winter. Remember that fast isn't better. Healthier is best. That is your true aim. You are not aiming for the biggest seedlings or the biggest plants. You're aiming for the healthiest ones that you can put out in your garden. If you grow healthy seedlings, you're going to have big, beautiful plants outside. Okay, next on the list is common seedling care mistakes. Mistakes that we all tend to do, especially as beginners. So a few of the mistakes: too much water. Like I said, wait for that surface layer to be dry to the touch before adding more water, and don't add too much water. Add a little bit at a time and allow it to soak up. We don't want your roots sitting in pools of water. Weak light. Remember, you need a consistent amount of light throughout the day, 12 to 16 hours, and your seedlings need to be 2 to 3 inches away from the light. Nice, strong, bright light. Fertilizing too early. Remember, we're not fertilizing until those true leaves start to show up. Skipping airflow. This is the area that I have struggled with. I even have a ceiling fan in this room, and that was not quite enough airflow for me. So making sure you're having good airflow, whether you've got doors or windows open, whether you've got an oscillating fan, having that airflow move throughout the day is going to create for healthier, stronger seedlings. And another mistake, panicking too soon. If you see something going on with your seedlings, take the time to research, try to figure out what is going on before you start ripping things out, throwing things away, spraying everything with all this stuff. Really look and see what the issue is and how you can fix that issue. Most likely it's going to be airflow, light, fertilizing, or water. Seedlings don't need micromanaging. They just need consistency, giving them nice, consistent elements. If you can fix the light and the airflow and the watering, you're going to be in really good shape. All right, last on our list is how seedling care fits into the bigger season. the direction that you're going with the garden. Why is this seedling care so important? In the end, you're going to be focusing on creating strong seedlings, and strong seedlings transplant better, they handle stress better, and they grow faster later once you get them out into the garden. So the work you do now shows up later in the garden outside. You might not see big giant seedlings inside, but as long as they are nice, strong, and healthy, once you get them outside, you're going to see awesome growth. Okay, I hope this was helpful for y'all. Just breaking down some of these steps, knowing what the requirements are for watering, for light, fertilizing, looking at common mistakes, talking about disease. Hopefully something within this video referenced an issue that you're having and now you know how to fix it. So seedling care isn't about doing more, it's about doing the basics very well. Keep that in mind. You don't need all the fancy, you need to do the basics very well. Light, water, air, and patience go a long way with starting seedlings inside. Tell me now, what are your biggest seedling struggles? Is it a particular variety of seedling? Is it airflow? Is it water? What are you seeing on your seedlings that are your struggles? Drop those comments down below. And over in my Patreon community, I'm going to have 2 documents available for free for you all. The first one is going to be a chart that's going to have common seedling problems. You can print it out, you can download it, whatever, pin it up wherever your seedlings are so that you can reference it. I'm also going to have a PDF that has a seedling care checklist, something you can also print out, pin up in your seed starting space and be able to go through it in case you're running into issues. I just want you guys to have these to reference very quickly. You can also just download the image and keep it on your phone. These are available in my Patreon community, and even if you join as a free member, you will have access to these 2 documents. Now, my Patreon community is a group of awesome people who just like to talk about gardening. We're supporting each other on a daily basis. Really kind of learning from each other, which is great. There's a free tier you can join in under, and there's the Certified Mad Gardener tier. The Certified Mad Gardener tier gets you access to lives, exclusive videos, group chats, photo sharing, and direct messaging direct to me, which is awesome. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. As always, she's a mad gardener or a decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all.